Hello there everyone, it's been a while, a little over a year since the last entry in this particular history series focusing on one of my favorite franchises of all time, .hack. Since that video, life and the channel have really taken off in various directions, with the channel continuing to primarily focus on Monster Hunter content, and me now finding myself in my final year of university as of writing this. While the channel has grown a significant amount in the past year thanks to Monster Hunter, I still often get comments asking me whatever happened to this particular series, and people wondering if I would ever finish it. Well, fear not, because while I have been distracted working on plenty of other content, I feel like it's time to revisit this series and potentially finally give it the finish that it deserves. But before we end this series with the final entry, Quarantine, we first need to take a look at the third part of the IMOQ quadrilogy, .hack Outbreak. Is quadrilogy the right word for that? I'm pretty sure I used a different word for that in the previous video. Both Outbreak and Quarantine are two entries I have the least experience with. While I have beaten all of the PS2 games in the past at one point while I was young, it's hard to remember a lot of the story beats or content introduced within them, especially because when trying to replay the series, I would often find myself dropping off after mutation. That ends today, everyone. We're finally going to see not only what Outbreak has to offer, but also go over the general story beats within .hack Liminality, the companion anime OVA series that released one episode along the release of each game. If you haven't watched my previous videos on the history of infection and mutation, I suggest you do so now. Additionally, if you enjoy these videos and want to help support the channel, please consider liking the video and subscribing. It just takes a couple of seconds and really helps boost the reach of the video to .hack fans everywhere, like Brazil, everywhere. What is .hack and how did it become one of the most expansive media series out there today that you barely ever hear of anymore, with multiple video games, animes, manga, light novels, OVAs, and so on. In this multi-part video series, I'll be going over all 4 volumes of .hack IMOQ, including Infection, Mutation, Outbreak, and Quarantine. We're on Outbreak right now, as well as the game's significance and influence on modern series that came out after it. Keep in mind, we're past the development history and focusing on core gameplay mechanics and storyline. I'm Super Rad, and I'm here to bring you a brief history of .hack Outbreak.
Force. The power it holds can bring forth either salvation or destruction at the whim of the user. It's coming.
.hack Outbreak, like the game before it, picks up immediately after the previous storyline events, with us finding Kite and Black Rose witnessing the effects of the cursed wave on the various root towns in the world. The infection is spreading after the death of Magus, one of the 8 phases, and all root towns and many areas within the world now have noticeable visual glitches beginning to spread all over them. As a short recap, Kite is looking to defeat the 8 phases and the cursed wave in an attempt to save his friend Yasuhiko, aka Orca, America in the world, who fell into a coma at the hands of Skaith, another of the 8 phases. Having received a special bracelet from an enigmatic AI known as Aura, Kite now goes around using the power of data drain to defeat bugs and enemies that would be invincible otherwise. If you want a much better understanding of the storyline, make sure you watch the previous 2 videos in the series going over infection and mutation. What are you even doing here if you haven't watch those 2? Come on. Within Outbreak, Kite soon runs into Mia, who is continuing to act in a way that is highly irregular in comparison to her personality within Infection. It becomes clear that whatever is affecting the world is affecting her, though Kite doesn't seem to realize this yet. Kite also runs into Mistral, who informs him that she's pregnant in the real world and soon to give birth, meaning she can't take part in anything too dangerous or stressful. This directly leads into her not being available for this entry, and players are forced to utilize Wise Man as their dedicated healer should they require one. Within a dungeon, Kite runs into Baomeng, who is fighting against a data bug. After saving him, Baomeng apologizes for his earlier betrayal during the events of mutation and asks Kite if they can work together from then on, realizing that the bracelet is the key to defeating the infection. Afterward, Kite meets with Black Rose in Hidden Forbidden Holy Ground, where she finally conveys to Kite that the reason she is fighting is because her brother fell into a coma and is one of the victims of the cursed wave. Both her and Kite had been having doubts about their actions since things only seemed to be getting worse, but she used this opportunity to bolster Kite's resolve so that they could keep pushing forward. For the next few story beats, Kite and his party begin collecting various virus cores for later gate hacking, specifically multiple virus core O's. Aura sends a glitched out email to Kite informing him of Fidhel, the next phase to be dealt with, and news articles begin popping up talking about major network issues and glitches happening in the real world due to the infection within the game. Leos is confronted by Baomeng as Kite shows up to meet him. Both players have lost patience with Leos due to his betrayals and overall lack of communication, but Leos seems to care very little, instead tasking the two with exploring a dungeon to analyze the infection. He agrees to go with them to see for himself and begins to realize that the world will be completely consumed by the infection if things keep going the way they are. Soon after, Kite's party goes to meet Aura, but the meeting is interrupted as they run into Cubia for another encounter, and Leos witnesses the party manage to repel it. The group realizes that Cubia seems to not only be getting bigger, but also directly trying to intervene whenever the party tries to talk to Aura. After repelling Cubia, Kite wants to stop working haphazardly and instead have everyone join forces, meaning Leos and Helba, who are normally at odds. Black Rose concocts a plan to have Leos and Helba meet in the net slum by writing a provocative BBS post, and once done, Kite explains to Leos that they need to start working together, believing that while Leos is a CC Corp employee, he still cares about the world and the victims that are in a coma. Leos informs the party that there is a data bug in a specific location, and if they can beat it without data drain, he will work with them. While this sounds impossible, Kite agrees to the confusion of Black Rose, and the party goes to fight said data bug or whatever, managing to kill it without data drain. Leos asks why they didn't use data drain and explains that it is a fake data bug he created for the test. Kite explains that he knew Leos saw them fight Cubia, and he knows Leos is a good person who cares about the world. Leos, hearing this and Kite's pleas, agrees to help. In the final events of the storyline, Kite, Black Rose, Baomeng, Wise Man, Leos, and Helba locate the next phase, Gore, and commence a unified operation titled Breakwater to take it out, which they succeed in. The title of the operation, Breakwater, is significant, and it is a means within the real world of using one wave to cancel out another. By creating a party of individuals unified against the phases, Kite has created a wave that will cancel out the cursed opposition. Upon finishing off Gore, Helba explains that there's huge data movement in one of the servers, in effect the wave. Kite explains that they now understand the game that Herald created within the world, and they have successfully committed a counterattack against the wave. The story ends here and continues in the next and final volume. Now, while everything going on in the world is fairly eventful, there's more detective work going on outside of the game at the same time, and for that reason it's time to talk about the third entry within the Liminality OVA series. While the previous OVA entry was more action-oriented due to the network complications affecting the real world, the third entry, in the case of Kyoko Tono, is much more of a slow burn and looks to shed some light on the mystery of the world's creation and the epitaph of the Twilight. In this entry, Junichiro Tokuoka visits Kyoko Tono in Takayama as she is one of the members of his new party to fight against CC Corp and learn more about the coma victims and the world. Kyoko receives a text message from none other than Helba, someone we know well within the game's narrative, but not so much within Liminality. Kyoko specifically is very wary of Helba, who Tokuoka mentions is known to be a notorious hacker. Tono also mentions that Helba is the Queen of Darkness within the epitaph. Tokuoka also receives a phone call from the reception desk of the hotel he is staying at, despite not telling anyone where he was going. The person on the other line is Bith the Black, another character from the epitaph and someone working alongside Helba, but nothing comes from it immediately. Instead, Tokuoka and Kyoko follow clues laid out from Helba. Some of these clues come directly from Mai and Yuki, as they received strange emails addressed to them that seem to come from Tokuoka and Kyoko. This infers that Helba is aware of all present members of the party and has them all under surveillance. The duo are led to a museum for a famous researcher by the name of Tomokichi Fokura, who studied clairvoyance and spirit photography. For real. Here, Kyoko lays out a bit of the story found within the epitaph for Tokuoka, since there seems to be a connection between this professor and the story. On their way out, they meet with an old woman who gives them their next clue and catch a glimpse of a man within a taxi cab who seems to be spying on them. Kyoko's father picks the two of them up during some downtime, and he explains that Tokuoka wasn't the only one interested in the epitaph today. Kyoko's parents are researchers and work for the local paper, and a man named Ichiro Sato paid him a visit to get more details about the book, but the father refused. The point of refusal was how much trouble the epitaph was overall, having first appeared online authored by Emma Weiland, with said original version being lost when she died at the age of 28. Many people were interested in the story, including occultists, but only 70% of it was found and restored, albeit inaccurately. For this reason, it's become impossible to tell what is from the original and what is just a fabrication. Kyoko explains a bit about Emma's backstory, touching on how she was a high-maintenance girl from a rich family who had both of her parents die. An uncle wanted to adopt her for her inheritance, but she refused. However, the inheritance was a trust fund that she would only receive when she was 20, so she went to school for nursing in the meantime. At the age of 20, she became ill and began coughing up blood, only to have some sort of spiritual experience that they don't really go into too much detail about. Due to this, she gained an interest in the supernatural and picked up on the researcher Tomokichi's work. Harold, the creator of Fragment and The World, also used the research for his own work on AI. While following another clue from Helba, the pair run into Ichiro, who introduces himself as both Ichiro and Bith the Black, the individual working alongside Helba. They all go out for a meal, and Ichiro explains that if Fragment were created as a literal representation of the world within the epitaph, then the network issues it's experiencing shouldn't be happening. But if that's the case, then what is causing all of the issues? They also have a discussion on consciousness and how Harold brought the outward inward, bringing the real world into the virtual. It's all philosophical. They're eating Big Macs. It's hilarious. They briefly mention the title of the OVA, Liminality, here, where you can like point at the screen, you can say, they said it. They said liminality. I made it to the point where they said liminality, which is a term used within anthropology, which refers to the transition between two states, suggesting that what Harold brought into the world is autonomous and changing gradually. Finally, Ichiro explains that for them to figure out what Harold was doing, they'd have to commit to action together and potentially become criminals in the process. He waits for the pair to agree before explaining to them what has to be done, but this is off screen and kind of left as a cliffhanger at the end of the OVA. Like you know that they have to do something criminal, but you don't know what it's going to be. The group is told that they will be contacted next on Christmas Eve. The biggest addition to the servers is the new Sigma server root town being added and explorable. However, the new root town, Fort Oof or Oof, I'm not sure, is full of visual glitches and errors just like every other root town previously explorable in the game. This does not remedy at all during the entirety of this volume's progression. Fort Oof or Oof is one of the larger root towns added and includes 2 new grunties to unlock, new flag races, and new items to be purchased from its weapon, magic, and item shop. drops. While the previous volume allowed players to explore areas up to level 50, Outbreak increases the cap within Sigma server and some special areas to 70, with most players reaching around level 72 on their party if taking part in almost all of the content and collecting most unique items. The difficulty spike present in Mutation is also noticeable here. Most enemies are tolerant to either physical damage or magical damage, meaning not only is the right party composition necessary, but you need to be meticulous in telling said party what actions to use or using the right items to remove said tolerances. Enemies also hit like a truck, either through magic or a high damage death attack that can completely one-shot you if you're not prepared. Items are a necessary resource, and there are multiple locations Kite has to solo, meaning there's a lot of grinding and planning necessary. Honestly, this was probably where the game really started to show its age and weakness. Playing IMOQ at a high level, you can really plan around your enemies and be incredibly effective. But if you don't cover for every possible situation, you'll find a lot of the areas turn out to be expensive and long slogs within an archaic battle system that does not really hold up to modern standards. Now, within combat, you'll be running into a lot more data bugs than in the past. Kite will be using data drain more than ever, not just because of data bugs, but because of how many new virus cores you'll need. New cores G, H, and I are added within this volume, and the player will need around 15 of each before the end of the final volume. Luckily, previous volumes cores can now be collected within dungeons as visible items to pick up without the use of data drain. Speaking of data drain, Kite gains the new ability of 2128 drain, which functions the same as its normal counterpart for a higher SP and infection cost, but allows for the chance of better rare item drops from the monster. Moving on to optional content, there's only one new party member within this volume for the player to pick up. Terajima Ryoko is a heavy axeman who accidentally put her real name as the name of her character. If that doesn't tell you enough, while she's mechanically useful in a gameplay sense, the narrative portrays her as fairly naive and inexperienced within the mechanics of the world, even needing to be saved by Kite within an optional dungeon after running off to fight a strong monster. Many previous original party members will have side quests for you to take part in, usually either wanting you to go to specific areas with them for an item or to defeat a specific monster, or for some other narrative-driven reasons, such as Rachel opening a delivery service of all things. I'm not joking when I say about half of the game is made up of these quests if you unlocked all of the previous optional party members. It's too much, man. And some of these guys are underleveled, so you're just getting one shot the entire time and making you waste healing items and resurrection items on them, and it's just costing you money. Like, come on, Moonstone, put your back into it a little bit so I don't have to carry your ass into a level 4 basement of a high-level dungeon. On the topic of minorly annoying side quests, there's a new set of optional Golden Goblin trials as well. If you don't remember from the previous videos, these tasks involve the player entering into an area solo and killing a single golden goblin who runs around the map at high speeds, meaning the use of buffs and items are necessary to succeed. To make this even worse, most of the trials in Outbreak have you fighting not one but 3 goblins at a time, many of whom can either heal each other, deal magic damage against you, or both. The general strategies usually remain the same, with using a speed buff, damage buff, and accuracy buff to take out the goblins, but later on they get so fast that you need to start casting sleep spells on them to even get a hit in, and eventually spells to remove their magic tolerance so that you can blow them away with elemental spells. For Grunties, Noble Grunty marks its return within Sigma server, with Melky Grunty, and Aqua Grunty making their first appearances. Melky Grunty and Aqua Grunty. And Aqua Grunty's terrifying. Awful. Flag races also return, and I won't be going into them again, but there's a brand new mechanic for when you ride your Grunty out on the field. Now each of the 3 Grunties per server can search for portals or items for you while you ride them. An example is Noble Grunty being able to find Grunty food for you. Simply ride Noble Grunty and press triangle and it will automatically traverse to the closest location. Grunties like Snaky or Melky can also take you to the nearest monster portal, making clearing field portals much easier and less time consuming overall, which is great for Ryu books. In the previous volume, you could go to specific areas to watch cutscenes that were recreations of scenes that happened within the companion anime series .hack Sign. This is not to be confused with .hack Liminality. This is a completely different series, takes place around the same time, I believe before the events of .hack IMOQ. You even got to meet Mimiru and be gifted her sword. In this entry, there's a much more involved side quest that leads to a lot of decent stat raising items, specifically the hunt for signed character ghosts. Starting with Mimiru, the player can visit a specific location within a specific root town to find a ghost version of Mimiru that will vanish upon talking to her. The player will in turn receive a special desktop wallpaper featuring a bunch of silhouettes of various signed characters. The player can do this in several locations several times to unlock the next signed character and repeat the process. You'll start with Mimiru, then find BT, then Bear, Sora, Krim, Silver Knight, A20 for some reason, Subaru, and finally the main character of sign, Tsukasa. A20 is a really weird choice as she wasn't incredibly relevant in the anime in comparison to the other characters you meet. Each time you complete the 6 encounters per character, their silhouette will be replaced with a picture of the character themselves, but the true reward of this endeavor isn't seen until the final volume of the series. Finally, there are 3 special areas to explore in this volume. The first is a high-level area best saved for near the end of the storyline, where players will visit a dungeon they are tipped off about within the BBS. It is said that a person witnessed a red wand in this area, and said red wand was utilized by Skaith in Infection. When Kite reaches the end of the dungeon, he finds the wand and watches as it is destroyed, freeing the trapped Sora character within it. Confused? Sora was a twin blade character from Sign who was attacked and possessed by Skaith during the events of that series. Once Kite defeated Skaith and found the wand, Sora was finally set free. Fun fact, the character comes off as fairly childish within the anime, and this is due to the player behind Sora actually being like a 12-year-old. Like I think it's 12. I think he's 12 years old. After the events of IMOQ, Sora grows up without any memory of the events that transpired and picks up in the world R2 as the main character of .hack GU, Haseo. You also get his signature weapons for freeing him. Next is a special area where you run into A20, who gives you a unique item for use in the final volume. Further into the dungeon, you can run into Elk, who is searching for Mia, and save him from a monster before you both run into Bear, who offers you his sword after recognizing Elk to look a lot like Tsukasa from .hack Sign. For the last area, just like the previous 2 volumes, completing the storyline unlocks a special endgame dungeon with a super boss at the end. This specific monster, Black Death, is particularly annoying due to how difficult it is to data drain it. Attacking with strictly melee will most likely kill the creature before data drain becomes an option, but magic isn't readily an option due to the monster having magic tolerance. Instead, the player is forced to use items or debuff spells to remove the tolerance and attack with magic until data drain becomes accessible. But this is really difficult because chances are the thing that you're going to use to get rid of the magic tolerance is going to miss, and it's going to one-shot you during that process, because whenever you use a spell or whenever you're being attacked by a spell, you're pretty much stuck wherever you are. You can't move, and you can't use any actions while you're casting a spell, so it's awful. And you just die. You just watch yourself die, and you try again. I tried this fight like 3, 4, maybe 5 times. This also marks the end of all the optional content aside from Ryu book grinding for new background music and wallpapers in Outbreak. Thanks to all the side quests and plot points, Outbreak is potentially the meatiest entry within the series, and with some of the toughest battles overall. It's also where virus core grinding becomes the most apparent and will continue into the final entry. Now, without a doubt, Kite and his party are fully on board for a counterattack against the cursed wave, looking to form a wave themselves that will cancel the events of the infection out and save the world as well as the various coma victims. The end is in sight, and soon all mysteries will be explained, hopefully. Outbreak is definitely one of the entries I remember the least within the series, but going back to it has a huge nostalgic aspect for me and many others. There's plenty of people begging for a remaster of IMOQ now that the same has happened for GU, but honestly, this game does show its age more and more every time I go back to it. While a remaster would be nice for preservation's sake considering how expensive the individual volumes are, IMOQ will be a rough experience to return to for many players who haven't played the game in years. The next part of this history series will cover the final entry .hack Quarantine and explore Kite and his party's efforts to finish off the rest of the cursed wave and the 8 phases. There's only 3 left, including Maha, Tarvos, and Korbanek. please look forward to it. If you enjoyed this video and found it informative, consider supporting the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. Again, it only takes a couple of seconds and helps support me and my goal of creating this content for you all. I try to respond to every comment I can, so if you want to hear from me, be sure to let me know. Just don't be rude. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I will see you in the next video. Hey, thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate it. You have made it to the Patreon section where I do little Patreon things. I shout out people. We have credits here. They should be here. They weren't there last time. I'm so sorry about that, but they are here now because I'm gonna remember this time, I'm pretty sure, hopefully. Disparity, thank you so much for the G rank subscription. I really appreciate it. Same to Joyce Sanders. Thank you so much for that G rank. Beyond the Time and Christopher, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it, guys. Hope you're having a great day. Nolan Brookman and IBM 200 and Per Gunnar Erickson, thank you so much, the three of you, for the G rank tier expansion Patreon pledge thing. Preesh. Atomic Weapon and Carl the Crab and Mo Al Qasemi, thank you so much. Kinky King, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Hope you're having a great day. Captain Zeba, or Zyba, probably Zeba, thank you so much for the G rank tier. Cyberworm, Mogbit, and Kathleen Medjuk, and Crunchy Cowroo, thank you so much for the G rank tier. I appreciate it, guys. You're so amazing. And Poggers, super pog-pilled. Jonathan Strange Lee, Lud Hifumi, Rosal Leo, and Justin Rangel, thank you so much for the G rank tier. Really appreciate it. You guys are fantastic. And finally, Mr. Janky, thank you so much for the G rank tier. Really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much. If you want to support me on Patreon so that you get into 1, the credits, 2, into the shout out, the vocal shout out, 3, a Discord role, and 4, into our Minecraft server, because we have Super Rad SMP going on now. You can join that too. Check the links down below in the description. You can find my Twitch, you can find the Patreon, you can find a bunch of other stuff that can help support me in creating these videos for you all. I really appreciate it, and I hope you have a great day. And I love .hack, and it's super cool. Goodbye.
Sureに焼けました